All right. Coming up on your end.
Oh, I have to consent. That's right.
Oh yeah. Okay. Yeah. Legal. All right. So actually, I have my first returning guest, and actually, I think this is what's the first interview video that I've had. I've had another video episode where I went to a Zen Buddhist temple here in Korea, but I think this is the first time I've actually had number one a returning guest, number two, a Zoom video feed, and I figured today would be a good day to do that because, as you mentioned last time, you're working on Liber Loagaeth, the Gebofal ritual, 49-day sort of Enochian initiation ritual. And perhaps if you could today, you could probably show a little bit of like visual, the book itself and what you've been working on and some certain things we couldn't do last time with the audio only format, right? So
Sure.
welcome back, Cliff, again. And he's from Enochian.today. And
That's right.
Yeah, I figured maybe we'll just crack into it, talk a little bit about how your experience was with the ritual and working on the book. And I did notice you posting that you're sort of like going over and fixing some things you felt that some of the leaves that you might have made mistakes on or modifications to, right?
Yeah, it's a whole thing. So I guess we'll probably start with the fun part, which is the massive 7.5 month creating of the book. So and it's I have seen so at the end of or at the middle part, I guess, of the transmission of Enochian to Dee and Kelly, they got this book, and the angels are like, okay, here's this book, and we need you to write this down. And it's called the angels said that it's the second part of the system, and it's of two parts of the system, and it's the measure of the other two. So the first part being the heptarchy, and the second part being the Liber Loagaeth, and then the third part being the watchtower / aether system. I kind of, the aethers are sort of embedded in there, but I feel like they're almost their own thing. But at any rate, so the angels are like, okay, make this book. So they get these letters, and poor Kelly has to like, okay, this letter, it's like, imagine playing Battleship with a 49 by 49 grid, and each time you have to call out the letter that goes in that cell, and then you have to do that 49 times 2 because it's front and back each time. It's kind of like that. I mean, there are a couple of exceptions to that, but at any rate, yeah. So long story short, you got to make this big book, and then they tell these poor guys, okay, now you need to make it in Enochian letters. So you need to do all this over again, and you need to reverse it. Instead of going left, right, you need to go right to left. It's a whole thing. So I've looked online for a version of this, and the one that there are a couple. There's one hosted by Fergoff, PHERGOPF. .wordpress. I mean, if you search those two words, you'll get it. And he's got all of this D material that used to be hosted on another site, all of these scans from like these Sloan manuscripts, which is where all the D Enochian material and a few of the appendices as well.
What was that that's the main manuscript you were working off on that website?
Yeah.
Okay, we can post on the show notes too.
Yeah, that would be great. And I'll send you at least what I have, but it's just this, and it used to be hosted somewhere else. So people, you can see this, maybe not quite a lineage, but it's like people trying to maintain this. It's like keepers of the flame, you know? So at any rate, I worked off of that. And, but I also, of course, you know, I mean, I'm standing on everybody else's shoulders here, you know, that, you know, people have actually done this, you know. So I saw this one site called Condor, KONDOR.de for Germany, where, you know, the guy has all of this Enochian stuff, and he's actually done the letters and stuff like that. And Joseph Peterson has done it as well, but I didn't have his stuff to work with. So I kind of used this as a reference, but I still found, you know, the occasional transcription error, and you gotta have the patience, you know, or be a really patient person to do this. And I'm not always going to be that, because I'm sure I've had errors. So you mentioned that as well. But at any rate, so let's show people what this looks like. So you're supposed to create the book, and you're supposed to, bind it in blue silk. And here, let me just let me see if I can turn off my
Oh yeah, probably turn off the background. Yeah,
yeah,
it
yeah,
doesn't
that
come in
that
all
helps.
mixed in with
It's coming up.
Tibetan Buddhism.
Yeah, there we go. Yep, yep.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's me too. That I'm just like this mad scientist when it comes to like mixing and matching stuff, because I feel like truth is anywhere. But at any rate, your viewers can probably see this is actually the back of the book, but this, you'll notice it opens in the opposite direction. It opens this way instead of the other way. But this is the Enochian letters. So Amzes, Nageses. This is the actual title of the book. Amzes, Nageses, Harda. And if I wanted to be a real annoying teacher, I'd make my students like repeat that back 7 times. But at
Right.
any rate, you're supposed to do this in gold, at the front. I actually used like gold leaf as well as this gold metallic paint, and I stuck it on there. And obviously, because it's silk, it's not going to stay on there. So I just took the liberty to like add some paper on top of that and glue that on there. So
What does that translate to in Enochian? The name of the book is
yeah. So there was one translation which was let him who hath understanding read, or something along those lines. But there's also like another translation which is the divine name of him that lasteth forever, something like that. Aaron Leitch has the translations, I think, in his essential Enochian grimoire.
Okay.
But
And
at any rate,
Liber Loagaeth is like the speech of God. Is that what it translates to, or something?
yeah,
Or the book
that's
of
what
God?
that's what Logos translates to, is the speech of God. So you get that first letter L, suggestive of the Hebrew or Semitic, I should be more technical, generic name for God. But yeah, so Enochian, you see this, so that like there's like these little modifications to stuff that already exists in the Enochian language. It's kind of weird. Like, it's not just strictly speaking, it's clearly not what Kelly said it was, which is like this, Ur version of Hebrew, Proto-Hebrew that supposedly goes back to it's not. But there's this, you do a linguistic analysis. It doesn't do that. But if you, but at any rate, so I don't want to get too far afield here. So yeah, so the thing is that making this cover is like the last part. The first part is making all of these leaves, and I'll just hold it up here, and you can see. I'll make it really close here. So you can see that there are all these teeny tiny Enochian letters, and this is actually the first leaf. And this one I redid. I had most of the leaves are going to look like this one, which is leaf 3. And I kind of did, you can tell I was just getting started, because right after that, I went to boom, just give me straight up grids,
Wow. Yeah.
So I would draw all of these out by hand with a ruler, obviously, and measure it out. And, and I had these little 12 by 12 inch pieces of paper that I would write it on. And there were a lot of little things I would do differently, like make sure both sides are completely flat. And I got to like this kind of not quite corrugated, but kind of this rough texture. But anyway, I did that for like 7.5 months. And so there's way too much to go into describing that process, but 7.5 months, absolutely all of the free time I could have. I poured into that. I planned around it. And this is on top of like working full time, taking care, of, household responsibilities, which includes, too much to get into. Just the whole, you got to kind of be a little kooky to do this.
Well, I was going to say, like, there's, so many people that have put out several books on Enochian have been doing it for decades who have not gone through this process. So what would you
can you
say
blame them?
Yeah, really, huh? What would you say that really pushed you? It was sort of like a deeper sense of connecting with the Enochian system, or was it sort of pushing the boundaries, exploring new areas?
Yeah, that's it. That's exactly right. Like, I'm always kind of doing that. Like, I find Enochian's kind of interesting because, there's not really it's tough to find the bottom to it. I may be getting close to that, but for example, as I was doing this, getting into the Gebofal ritual, not only am I like, recording 3 times a day, and the energy was like, sometimes it was palpable. Like I could literally feel energy coming up off of the book as I was like making the call to this and that. And I'll get into the structure of how I did that in a second. But I'm, I think I sort of have this mentality sometimes, like I want to like, I really want to, I'm driven to understand, and I'm driven to like try to find this stuff. And I had gotten so much out of the Aethers the first time
Mhm.
that I scried them, I'm just like, well, let me see what else there is. Or it's like this sort of, it's like you could almost see something beneath the surface. And when I had taken that Enochian Master Class with Leitch and with Stenwick and with Newcomb, and you can, yeah, I guess you could probably link to that off of Stenwick's site. You may get a 50% discount if that's still available. I don't know, but
Yeah,
at
I
any
got
rate,
a discount on his website too. I took that same course. Yeah.
yeah, it may still be there, but specials for your viewers that he may or may not still intend to offer. But anyway, yeah, so it was, but I heard Leitch talk about this. I'm like, it's like in the back of my mind, and there's just so much like information that is coming at you.
Mhm.
But I'm like, yeah, I just want to get started on this. So when I started, so I start making the book and I start doing the ritual proper, just to get this sense of it. It's like, okay, I'm thinking about it in the back of my mind. I want to get this ritual started. So I do the 7.5 months of making the book. And I did the calculations, by the way. It's supposed to be done in 40 days. I think in 40 24-hour days, and that's probably about the amount of time I spent. So roughly 1,000 hours. But
Right.
getting back to your question about why, I just felt like there was a little bit more. And like, I remembered Leitch talking about this. I'm like, geez, if Aaron says that there's this other thing, maybe I should just, try to like make, go ahead, be a completist, be that person who wants to get all the achievements on the video game, but
Sure.
also just deepen the initiation into other stuff. I had already, I mentioned the mad scientist thing, trying to push the boundaries. I had already kind of done that. I have a couple of techniques I put on my site, like trying to, I wanted to make like an initiation. Jason Louv talks about the Aethers as being an initiation into Bina, the Sephirot of Bina, or Sephira of Bina. And I'm like, well, what about Chokmah, and what about, Keter? And he's like, well, in his book on it, John Dean, The Empire of Angels, he talks about how, you need to, the system itself doesn't do that. You can get like visions of,
Mm.
partial visions of those Sephirot. Well, I'm like, well, how would you do that using Enochian? So at first I'm like, well, let me try using this call to the Aethers, but I'll be sneaky and I'll use this Enochian word for crown for Keter, and I'll use this Enochian word for hidden or secret wisdom for wisdom, Chokmah. And you start getting stuff if you do that, and the angels had stuff for me, and they're like, well, do this and do this. And I was, there was a transmission involved in all that. It's kind of too much to get into even for now, but I got some success with that. But I'm never satisfied. It's like, always try to deepen your initiation, or just do what you're going to do, right?
Mhm.
So I'm like, well, let me do this as well. Why not? Nothing wrong with that. So, and it turns out that the more I looked into it, Gebofal was supposed to be this basically an equivalent to the 50 gates of Bina, except for wisdom, for Chokmah. So I'm like, well, great, sign me up. So so that was kind of the rationale for that. But yeah, it's like so deep, and even just like, I mean, we can talk about the ritual itself, but like I would just like I would get into this, and I would like discover more stuff as I'm going along, like, and I don't think other people had found it yet.
Mm.
Like
Well,
the
because
number.
Aaron did
Yeah, go ahead.
mention Gebofal, and he talks about Liber Loagaeth as Essential Enochian Grimoire, and I think the
Hmm.
other. I haven't read the other two. As the it's called like the Angelic Language, Volume 1 and 2. I haven't read those. Have you?
Yeah, I've read. I'm kind of, I use it more
Oh.
like a thesaurus where you're looking something up, or a
Mhm.
translation dictionary.
Okay,
But yeah,
right. But I think the first one goes over like the history of the language. I haven't really cracked into that, but
yeah.
he hasn't really published. He mentions Liber Loagaeth and Gebofal, but he hasn't really published like a system behind it, or like what he did, because there's a lot of as far as the book itself, you're working off these manuscripts that you mentioned, but as far as the ritual, there's no
Yeah.
you have to kind of what would you say? You have to kind of work with the system and make it your own kind of, right?
Yeah, so the answer to your question is not quite. So
Okay.
Aaron has not published
Mhm.
officially in a book something, but there's still stuff on his website that I don't know if it's still out there. So maybe he doesn't want me talking about this, but if it's still there, you got to take it down, right? But
Mm.
he's, it's and maybe he just kind of he has it in this draft state, and I can see it's clearly not like ready for like a book, but it's a draft copy. And what I did is I worked off of that. So he had 2 chapters, they're chapters 2 and 4, and if he wants to take them down or if he's mad at me for saying it, but I'm just speaking about what's out there, sorry, Aaron, we haven't met, but I really dig you. I'm a huge effing fan here.
Mhm.
But at any rate, he did have a couple of things. Now I reworked what he had, but he essentially, the idea is that you start doing the Enochian calls, which is the only thing we have. We're kind of doing it in the opposite order, which is kind of poetic because the angels kept on saying the first shall be last and the last shall be first.
Mm.
So, we have the calls first and then we're going to do Gebofal, whereas Dee and Kelly, they had Gebofal first and then got the calls. So
Right.
we don't know. I mean, I didn't find anything else now maybe I'm just a poor researcher or I didn't use the right Google search term, but I didn't find anything else, but I did find Aaron's stuff.
Okay.
So what he talks about is basically, he has this, he mentions what Ave recounts as, the prayer of Enoch, the angel Ave recounted as that. So I did a version of that, except I modified it slightly because, there's always the thing you get, and then you want to kind of personalize it a little bit. So I added a little bit in there, and I did so. I wanted to make it like, instead of however many words long, I wanted to make it 999 words long to sort of incorporate other systems that I've been exposed to or / participated in.
Mhm.
So, and then kind of like the 50 gates of being, or the 49 gates of being a final day is like, you get that extra one to make it 50, or the 49 gates of wisdom, you get that extra one at that insight at the end. So I kind of want to do something like that with the prayer. So I appended a few things to it, not too much. And changed a little bit of the wording, but not much. But what I would do is, so yeah, let's get into brass tacks. So what I would do is I would face east in the morning, pray, then open up the book and to the appropriate leaf for that day. So you're doing them backwards because the first shall be last shall be first.
Okay.
So you start at leaf 49, and the basic template would be, so let me just, I'll just like, I'm trying to I'm doing this mainly to help my memory, not to show people, but so I'd open the book and I would put my hand upon the leaf and I would, make the call associated with that. So I would do call 49, which is the call to text, and I would do that 3 times a day. The first day I would do like leaf 49B, which is the back of leaf 49. Then in the noon time, I would do the front, and I would reverse it, put my other hand on the leaf on the front side. And then in the evening, I would put both hands together, holding the leaf like this. And I would, I would record myself having the vision, and I would, do all that. And then on top of that, I also incorporated the heptarchy.
Okay.
So because why not be a total geek and get absolutely all parts of the system going? Go ahead.
So you're reading the call, but you're also reading the leaf itself. Is that right?
No, just the call.
Just the call. Okay, so you're not reading what's actually.
Yeah, with one exception. With one exception. Yeah. So so I'll get to that in a second. So but on top of that, I would add in the heptarchy. So I would let's see, I'm trying to remember exactly how I did this. I would put the seal, let me try to remember exactly how I did this. The final 19 days, I would incorporate the watchtowers.
Okay.
I would put my foot on the watchtower tablet for that day. And I have up on my website the rationale about why I did all that. But I would also Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, I would go through that. I'm trying to remember if I did that for all 49 days. I think I did. Yeah, what I would do is, so at any rate, so if it starting on a Sunday, which is when I started. Okay. I did this, by the way, aligning with the counting of the Omer, which is just how Leitch had that. But what I would do is I would put my foot on the seal for, and which is how you do it in Enochian. You don't just
Talking about the
hold it.
heptarchian
Yeah,
seal, right?
yeah, the heptarchian
Right.
seal. Yeah. But in Enochian, you put your foot on the seal, which is kind of weird. But yeah, the heptarchian seal for Sunday. So for King Bobogel, and I would put my foot on that, then make the call, and then the next day would be Monday. So King Blumeza, and then so on and so forth, until you get to Saturday, and then the cycle repeats.
Okay.
So I would do all that. So I tried to like incorporate as much as I already had of Enochian with that. So it was kind of good that I did it, that you kind of you don't do it in the exact order, because you're trying, what I'd wanted to do is like get the fullness of the system all working at once. So
right. Well, it sounds like, you integrate the heptarchy, the calls to the aethers, the watchtower, so everything kind of comes together.
Yeah, over that 49-day period, you have gone through all of the pretty much all of Enochian proper, the original transmission.
Okay.
So that was a lot. And then on the final 19 days, I would use the actual watchtower tablets, because those are the ones associated with watchtowers.
Okay, that's very interesting. What you did blog all this on your site, right? You blogged every day. You recorded
every day.
Yeah,
every day, 3 times a day, and I would have one post with all three experiences. Yeah.
Okay. I have to go through and read those. But what are some? Are there any unique ones or specific ones where? I'm sure I'm sure the whole thing is a unique experience, but maybe something that you really didn't expect, or
Yeah. So what I found is a lot of, and if you ever go through this yourself, you'll find everything that you learn from Buddhism is very helpful, very, very helpful. So there was this time when what I found is that, for me, what my experience was is that this was about coming to terms with suffering in a way that kind of goes beyond. Now, don't get me wrong, like it's tough to describe this, but like if you've been through the aethers and you've had that vision of Zip, which is the 9th aether, which is really, if you're going backwards order, it's the 22nd aether, because you got 30, you have to reverse the order and all that. But the 9th aether, if you get up to that point, then you have this vision of Babylon. Well, what I would find is that a lot of things I wasn't expecting is that there were you were starting to see stuff a lot earlier in the process, or there was this, like, think of it like a rubber yardstick. Sometimes it would like stretch out like this, so you'd see, and then other times that you would compress it and you couldn't see this. And it was like, it's very weird Enochian like that, where the angels sort of like move stuff around, or if you've already done certain things, then you're already ready to have that vision. So it's not a big deal if you have a little bit of a preview. But what I would find is, like, after getting up to a certain point, they're like, okay, we're going to take you to this point, but we're not going to let you see past that. I'm like, and I remember this one time, like energetically, what happens is, you go through the aethers, you're activating your psychic abilities and stuff like that, and you kind of know what to do. Like, okay, at this point, if you're in Zax, for example, okay, what I really need to do is just concentrate here and not get distracted by this attempt to disperse, but instead concentrate through. And so you kind of pull on like little lessons like that as you go through. And if you have like any sort of clairvoyant ability, or you're able to sort of semi-manipulate the vision. You're interested in certain things, so you're trying to look around and see this. So I remember one time I was trying to like see past something that the angel's like, well, we're probably not gonna, you're not gonna be able to see much of this. So I'm like, well, let me just try to concentrate this. And I remember like trying really hard to see it, and then bam, there's this like big burst of light, and it's like blinding me in a vision, right? Like, what is this? Come on, man. It's like you heard during the debates, last year.
Right.
Come on, man. Come on, man. Like, wait, like, come on. Like, but you gotta wait. You gotta do it in the order. They're very orderly, these Enochian angels, even when they're like switching and turning things around. They still want you to follow the order, because you need to be a good human,
right,
instead of trying to do work on your terms. So at any rate, what I found was, let's talk about some of the things that I saw that was interesting to me in terms of suffering and coming to terms with that. So what I was reminded of, and I'm using this term advisedly, given that I'm a mod on a Discord where somebody who may take this to mean a different thing. But at any rate, if you've read Philip K. Dick, and I've read a little bit of him, I have not read all of him, but he talks about this in one of his books. He talks about the Black Iron Prison, and that's a nice metaphor that Robert Anton Wilson, which is mainly how I get a lot of my Dick knowledge. I should go back and read some of the source material from Philip K. Dick himself, but he talks about how that's a really interesting metaphor for reality, right? Like, oh, we're stuck in this system of control. And if you it's on one level, it's like, well, there are these people who are trying to control us, or this unfeeling system. You go onto Facebook right now, you're going to have a very different Facebook feed from mine because you follow different people, and the algorithm's going to amplify certain things for you and not for me. Doug Rushkoff talks about this.
Right.
So at any rate, this idea about how, oh, we're being controlled by the algorithm, man, that's a very like kind of Black Iron Prison, we're all being controlled sort of view.
It's sort of reflecting yourself back to yourself. It's sort of
yeah,
where in a way.
Yeah, it's kind of like, I think of it like Saturn, which is like restriction and denial or delays. And so like that sort of astrological metaphor. So, and Saturn, of course, is associated with black, as is Binah, so, but there's also like the flip side to that. Well, what if this blackness is really just this blinding light that we can't see? So this is where there's that duality to figures like Babylon, where at first it seems like she's there's the blackness is suffering, and that's why there's redness associated with her, and partly because you're getting some of that martial aspect from the lower Sephira of Gebura, because there's that tendency to like, we can't concentrate up enough to actually see the beauty of her. So at any rate, okay, so taking that Black Iron Prison metaphor, so if we're stuck in that's a really terrible place to be in, right? And we have no control, and it's what I call like an archonic kind of reality, thinking in terms of Gnosticism, like, oh, we're stuck, we're being controlled by these archons that are, we're just puppets, in their game, and it's a great way to get paranoid. Yeah, pawns in a greater game, man. So the thing is like, how are we gonna cut our strings? So, and then you get stuck in that. Well, that's fine. That's actually a decent place to get in, because then it's about, how do you gain agency in this world? So okay. So this is all like the big wind up, to the pitch, and then I'm gonna come to the other side and try to knock it out of the park. So the idea, combine this idea with Crowley's 0 equals 2, or 1 negative 1, the absolute value of negative 1 plus 1 equals 0. So really, any 0 is just the combination of a thing and its opposite, right?
Sure.
So if you sort of think of the metaphor that was coming through, was that suffering is a lot like that, right? Like, you're either stuck with too much of something or too little of something, right? Like there's that Buddhist phrase, how do you guarantee suffering in this world? Wanting things to be as they are, or wanting things to be as they aren't.
Right.
So, but you get a lot of that, right? Like, oh, I'm craving for this thing, and now I've had it, and I've had too much, and now I'm suffering because I'm sick to my stomach. Or I've had this thing, but now all of a sudden I'm going on this different polarity, and suddenly instead of food, I want sex, or instead of sex, I want power. And so you see how like the human mind can get caught up in this dynamic, kind of a binary thinking. And hence why we talk about this phrase of like a middle pillar. Why is that middle pillar so important? Well, because you're not kind of veering off into different directions and making yourself miserable. So why do I bring all this up? Well, it turns out that you can think of, the problems with reality. Maybe it's not like a Black Iron Prison, like a black iron, like a black cube specifically, but instead it's more like a black sphere, where you can say, oh, okay, if only I got to the center of this sphere, then I would suddenly be able to, I would have perspective on everything, right? Like I would not be subject to the vicissitudes of wanting this thing or that thing or this thing. Instead, I just be at the center, be in a place of equanimity. So that was sort of like this big metaphor that came through. Then on top of that was this metaphor of, well, that's a good place for compassion, right? And that's exactly what the Buddha taught, right? So here you get this idea of, okay, you're aware of this suffering around you. Well, how am I going to respond? And so you say, okay, I'm going to respond with compassion because I see all this stuff, and I'm going to, so, well, where does that start? Well, for me, it starts kind of at a very real, visceral place at the heart, not visceral because that's in the guts, but you get my idea. So at a very, fleshly, so you get that heart center, that center of anahata, and then you work from there, and then you're able to do all that. So there's like this white sphere, or tiny white sphere within the bigger black sphere, which itself can be, managed and contained if you do kind of a very orderly type thing. We talked about the evil order, the black cube, the black iron prison, that evil order versus the flip side of that, which is following decent rules to be a decent human being, right? So the Eightfold Noble Path, for example, just as an example. So this is like all of this stuff, Ryan, is just like over and over, like, okay, try this, now try this, now, and just this is like a huge download, right? Like this is like not only, this is like leaping over anything Christian, right? This is, or it's explaining, like you could map on whatever, like you could say Christianity, you could say, whatever you want, but this is leaping over all of that and saying, here's the nature of suffering. And a lot of Buddhist models work very well. You could also say like original sin. You could map on different stuff onto that to make it work. But this is like boiling it down into a very symbolic thing. So that was a huge thing.
Okay.
So I don't know what else you might want me to say, but like, there's, of course it's Enochian, so you get into the math. So there were a couple of math things, but also I remember there was this one vision that I had where the emotion of it was just so raw. And you know how Crowley talks about or the idea as it's been interpreted to me of Nuit in the Book of the Law, and is this sort of potential, and it was sort of along those lines. I got the sense this was more like in the realm of Adam Kadmon than in the supernals per se, using that, assuming that you say the four worlds, and then the fifth world is sort of the Ein Sof and Ein and all of that.
Above Keter,
yeah, above Keter or transcending Keter or whatever.
Right.
But one of the things I found, I remember there was this one vision where it was just like I didn't know what was happening, but like there was this like I got the sense that there were these two beings fighting within the very core of my heart. It was just very emotional. I did not understand what was going on. I'm like halfway in vision here. I'm like, what is this? And they were like fighting and grappling with each other. And then it kind of came and like whooshed out from my heart. And what I found was that it was the two sort of forces battling each other was sort of like real life and actuality. And then all of the possibilities, or you could say opportunity costs, that never came to be. And that is, of course, a much larger set, right? And there's like versions of myself where, had I fallen down the stairs in 5th grade, there are lots because my sister pushed me because I didn't have the presence of mind to stop my fall and all that. But there's all these versions of yourself that never came into being. And it was kind of interesting because like there was a lot of hatred between these two and enmity between these two, because you get to be real, but I'm equally valid, so what, so I hate you, well, I hate you too because you shouldn't be real, blah, 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 blah. So it was like this weird, it was like those two sort of archetypal energies that battling with each other. And it wound up being like this extended metaphor of, how in Buddhism there's that mantra Om Mani Padme Hum, speaking about the Padme, the lotus,
jewel in the lotus, I think, right?
the jewel is in the heart of the lotus, or I've heard it interpreted like that, but yeah. So but the Padme part was, the lotus part was interesting, and what I got out of that was the symbol of a lotus rose, where you get a lotus, which in a lot of ways is beautiful like a rose, but it's sort of,
Sure.
the metaphor is always, well, it's so beautiful, but it's also, born out of the mud, right? But it
Right.
wasn't just enough for me to have, okay, it's born out of the mud. It's also painful to hold,
Mhm.
because so that's where the rose part comes in, where the stem isn't just a stem of a lotus, but it's more like a rose stem where there's all these thorns on it. But you have to like accept that it's going to be painful. Life's
Mm.
going to be like that. Sorry,
Right.
but you
Right.
can still have this transcendent experience within that pain or in spite of that pain. It depends on like how you structure your approach to magic and stuff like that. And I'm not going to tell people how to do that, but to
Sure.
me,
Sure.
symbolically, it was about coming to terms with that. So there's like, it was just like this massive, like it was always like building on top of itself as it went along. But
Sure.
it
Sure.
was
It
it
almost
was
sounds like
it
there
was
was
grand.
a very interesting. It almost sounds like there's this resolution of different aspects of yourself, of what you could have done or who you could have been, and these sort of
Yeah.
karmic, the multi-dimensional self, right? That's,
Yes.
you know,
Or multiversal self.
yeah, exactly. That's sort of, we're all holding on to like, what if I had done this? Or there's these
Yeah.
regrets and these alternative views out there, right? But then
Yeah.
it sounds like it's sort of, I don't know when this was, but sometime in the ritual, it sort of came to head and you started seeing, it's almost a empirical experience of this guy, this cliff and this cliff coming together and battling it out,
Yeah.
but then coming into a sort of reconciliation, I guess you would say, of the different
Yeah.
aspects, of yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's, if you think of it like Jung's shadow, they talk, oh well, this, I'm a good person, therefore I don't do this, but the shadow really wants to do that. So like, I don't know, there are all these examples. I won't get into details because this is an advanced podcast, kids. So you look into that. But
Right.
at any rate, you think of that. What I always consider, what I've come to consider the shadow is to be like this crystallization
Mhm.
of all of the opportunity costs that, obviously you give up. That's the price you pay. So
Mhm.
in economics and opportunity cost, for those of you who don't know that, because this is a part I don't expect people to know, because it's a different thing. I expect people to know Jung, but not economics, right?
All right, now we're going to
Which
economics.
is why, yeah, which is why we're in the state we're in today, right? This is why.
Sure.
But the opportunity costs, just really quick, like for me, having this podcast with you right now means that I don't get to do the stuff that I may otherwise want to do, right?
Sure.
So I'm giving up an opportunity. That's the cost, right?
Mhm.
And the opportunity to do absolutely anything else. And more technically defined, it's the absolute next best thing I could be doing to
Sure.
doing this podcast.
Sure.
So, and I don't know what that would be, but um,
Mhm.
at any rate, that's the idea. So the problem is that the shadow, if you think about it, like you think about like, well, what do you regret, or what do you wish you had done, or what do you when you're fantasizing about what your life might have been like,
Mhm.
you think about like, oh well, I could have been this, I could have done that. And the problem is that if you crystallize that into sort of this own voice in the back of your mind saying, oh, you could have done this, oh, if only you had done this, then what happens is that you realize, if you analyze the arguments, and you wonder why it's so seductive, it's because he has a point, and
Mm.
or she has a point, or what, NB, whatever the case may be,
Sure.
that voice in your head has a point.
Mm.
Because and why does it have a point?
Mm.
Because you see other people doing it, and they seem to,
Right.
they seem to get something out of that, but maybe it wasn't for you. And that's the whole problem of coming to terms with that. And that was a lot of that particular battle between the two was about, okay, accepting that you're going to miss out on some stuff, and realizing it has a point. But that was sort of like that battle that I'd already sort of, I had that sort of idea before, but this sort of was very visceral
Okay.
when they were battling at the energetic level. It was like, ooh, touched a live wire there.
Yeah, very interesting. So you did mention that the Liber Loagaeth, the whole Gebofal process, it is interpreted as sort of this initiation ritual. It could be like a 49-day Enochian ritual for initiation, but you did the Aethers, you did the Heptarchy, you did the Great Table or Watchtower work earlier. I mean, say somebody was starting out, would you almost, would you advise them like do the, Liber Loagaeth? Like this is, I mean, it's not even really that explored, but what do you think, after doing all of it, what do you think would be a good order,
Yeah, so if you're going to do the order, a couple of recommendations. I mean, as you're doing all of this, get a good background in astrology.
Okay.
And why, come on, man, why are you bothering me with this? I'm supposed to be liberated from this stuff. And like, well, what did I just explain? It's about, coming to terms with the limitations of reality and finding the best way to manage that. But get into astrology, because it's going to make the heptarchy make sense, and it's going to make the zodiacal kings make sense. And one of the things, just being steeped in that download, what download do I get today, man? It's like, like a very smart kid coming into kindergarten or the first day, yay, what do I get to learn? And they get to learn all this stuff, and it's great for them, until they become a cynical fifth grader. But so I recommend that, mainly because you're going to learn some stuff and you're going to see some stuff. One of the things I found as I was doing this, and this is just like separate from the ritual itself, but it's like you get steeped in, and it's like, I don't know if I was being shown this or if I was just being guided to look at this stuff, but if you look at the zodiacal kings as they appear in the aethers, right?
Okay.
Every time there's a governor, there is one zodiacal king going with that governor. So there are 91 governors. There are only 12 zodiacal kings, so they appear multiple times each. So what I did was I said, well, okay, I know that each of those zodiacal kings is associated with a sign, and each sign is definitely associated with domicile, a planet of domicile, which is an astrological term. Like it's a home to one of the planets. So, for example, Aries is home to Mars. That's where Mars is strongest. It's also, but the signs also have an exaltation scheme, where the 7 planets have 7 signs in which they are exalted. So it turns out that if you do the math on this, it's kind of weird. Like, I was looking at the kings and I was like, what's going on with this? Why is the king for Pisces appearing 15 times and the king for Aries appearing 5? What's up with that? I didn't get that. But what it turns out, if you do like the math on that, because Pisces is the exaltation home of Venus and the domicile home of Jupiter, then you get 30 times in which a planet is either exalted or in domicile there.
Okay.
So, and then it turns out that if you do all the math on that, on all 12 of those signs, you have 144 exaltations or domiciles. Well, 144 is not only 12 times 12, which is the number of the zodiac squared, but it's also the reverse of 441, which is the number that appears in the total of the outer ring of the SDA. And also there's this leaf 1 of Liber Loagaeth has 441 cells where it's only letters instead of actual words in that. So you find like these little like patterns, and it's like
patterns and puzzles in it.
Yeah, and there's no way you would know. Like, I just happen to have this interest in astrology. Now, there are other astrological occultists, and how many people, a lot of them may be into Enochian, but it just happened to work out that I had like this knowledge, I could combine it with this, and that suddenly I get strangely curious about this seeming imbalance.
Okay.
But so anyway, these are the things that sort of go along. But to answer your question more properly, so learn some astrologies, go along, obviously learn the elements, learn the Golden Dawn idea of a sub element. So like the way Ramsey Dukes, I think, talks about it is like the northern part of the western side, oh, well, that's sort of like the fiery part of the
fire of air and
fire of air. Or if you go in the west part of the west side, that's why you can have fire of fire. It's not just the doubling up. It's like that idea. So learn about the elements, and then it'll suddenly, like, I've been thinking about this. I don't know. It's kind of weird with me. It's like, it's so much like based on circumstance and not desire. It's like, okay, can I do this in the time I have? Theory of constraints and all that. But like, my idea is to try to say, is it possible for somebody to learn Enochian? And that would be like the first thing. Okay, suppose you didn't have the Golden Dawn. Could you learn it just from from basics building blocks like that.
Mhm.
And I think it is. And so maybe I'll write a book on that someday, but I don't care if somebody
Yeah,
beats me to the punch. I'm just about promoting the system because I really enjoy it. But getting
sure.
back to your question, so elements,
Yeah.
learn about astrology,
Uh,
but and then in terms of working the system itself,
mhm.
I would say the heptarchy is probably the easiest
Yeah.
and to study and remember,
Mhm.
because then it's just, okay, I need to memorize 7 kings and 7 princes. You
Mhm.
could memorize all the ministers
Mhm.
and kind of incorporate that with the planetary hours. Aaron Leitch did a fabulous job with that in his
Right.
essential Enochian grimoire.
Mhm.
And but what I would say is, like, that in terms of studying it, learn that. In
Mhm.
terms of doing it, work with the aethers.
Mhm.
Start with the aethers, do it, step by step,
Mhm.
because that's the unfolding of the consciousness that you get. That you start it, the visions are like, it's weird to say this,
Mhm.
but it's like the visions are almost like way too easy to get in
Mhm.
Enochian compared to like other systems, in my view. I don't
Oh,
know
for
what your
sure.
experience has been,
Yeah, yeah,
but yeah.
definitely. Yeah, definitely my experience. I've even scribed text for some people who have no experience with any sort of, you know, meditative or magical system or anything, and everyone gets some kind of result, which that says a lot. It's not like,
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of theory. You can say it's barbarous words put you in an ecstatic state, or there's a lot of theories you can put behind that, but you can take somebody to a Pentecostal church and they might feel the Holy Spirit or something, but when you scry something like text, people are having vivid, visionary experiences, encounters with entities.
Mm-hmm.
I've even scribed text for somebody who knows nothing about Christianity or anything, or Western religion per se, but was seeing these angelic characters and beings and stuff. So I mean, that alone says that how powerful it sort of just works right out of the box. Like,
Yeah.
I think pretty much text seems to be accessible for pretty much anyone. But
Yeah. And I've had something similar, when I've done that with other folks. And it's weird too. It's like, and I don't know how much people have been doing Zoom magic during lockdown, but it's interesting seeing that, like, I have I've made the furniture. I'm
Mhm.
gesturing towards the furniture that nobody can see, but and I've done like that 18-day ritual or a version of that to try to like incorporate it and imprint it on yourself.
Mhm.
Just kind of like basic stuff there. And it seems to have like this transmissible quality where, you know somebody over there seems to have about the same level or kind of experience as what you have over here. I think there tends, you can feel a little bit more of the energy. Like I remember one person in
Yeah,
live, they felt a warmth on the side of their face, but not
sure.
the other one. But I don't know.
I'm
It's
curious,
it's interesting.
your experiences. So working with, say, like the archangels or angels of the planets and whatnot, versus working with Enochian entities. For me personally, I'm curious your view. Personally, my experience is they have been a lot stronger, a lot more alien in nature, is almost how I would describe it. Just a different feeling, a different presence, a different, uh, almost more like multi-dimensional alien-like, versus when maybe working with angels of the elements or things along these lines. It's almost more light and fractal, if that makes sense to you. I'm curious what
Hmm.
your experience with these entities has been like.
Yeah. So when I was doing the so I'll talk about the split between Enochian and other angelic systems. Surprise, there's multiple angelic things you can do.
Sure, sure. Yeah, exactly.
Versus Enochian, which has layers within layers. So
Right.
the elemental Enochian, the Watchtower Enochian angels,
Mhm.
I didn't. It's funny because in the aethers I have like bigger visions and I can see a lot more at once.
Mhm.
But I never really got the sense. I'm kind of okay at a lot of different things.
Mhm.
So I'm an okay scryer. What I don't see is like a big presence of somebody, except with occasional notable exceptions. Like I
Yeah.
won't always see the angels per se. I'll just get like the sense of a figure over here or over here, whatever the
Sure,
case may
sure.
be. One time I did see the Governor Mirzand appear to me as Dr. Manhattan, which was hilarious, by the way. Um,
Right, right,
but
right. Yeah.
getting back to your question, so the elemental angels, I think there is something to be said about them being kind of fractal in the watchtower and lower angels, lesser
Right.
angels, or the cherubs, Stenwick calls them the lesser angels. But I think he also puts quotation marks around them because their powers are amazing. But yeah, I think there is something to be said for that. I haven't had quite as much success with them. I think I've had about a 50% success rate when I've tried to do a working. One person, I did the jewels and gold and precious stones power with that. And obviously there's so much to remember. It's like, I can't memorize all this stuff, but anyway, he did not get gold and precious stones. Oh, well, is that a failure? No, it was a complete success because what he got was like a $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 desk at a garage sale for like $2. But he knew the value of it. And it's like, okay, do
Well,
you
that's a
want
gem and a precious stone in this era.
exactly, right? Like, come on, man. Like
Yeah.
it's right there. So
Yeah.
so for that, and I've had some success, but I'm not going to say I've had the most success. But the feeling that I got when I've worked a completely separate system, so like Stenwick's, Scott Stenwick is the person we're talking about. He's amazing.
He's been on this podcast. Great guy.
He is a treasure, man. He
Really
is
is. His
the
books are
best.
great too. Both of his books I recommend checking out.
Yeah. They're very readable. But so when I did his kind of system with planetary invocations for a certain thing, I didn't get the same, like I could feel a presence, but I didn't get a vision per se. But yeah, there is something kind of a little bit more cosmic or integral to the nature of the universe almost, which is not to say you don't get that in Enochian, but it's like in Enochian, it's like the vision is very clear and there's something, they're trying to make it understandable to you. Whereas, if you're just doing like the archangels themselves, which is not to say the archangels aren't part of Enochian, but it's a whole other story. But if you're just working with the archangels themselves and let's say the planetary spirit and planetary intelligence, which is what I do with Stenwick's format, it's more like, okay, you feel the presence and you're asking it this thing and it's like, okay, and then anything else and then no, okay, bye. So it's not quite impersonal, but it's more like you're calling on the dimensionality of it. So I think that alienness is, or like this untapped part of consciousness, if you want to say that it's all just consciousness, which that's a whole other rabbit hole to get a discussion on. But yeah, I would say so.
Yeah,
I would
definitely.
say that's a good observation.
Right. Definitely experientially different, to say the least, right?
Yeah.
So you mentioned that you're an okay scryer. So your experiences like in the aethers or during this ritual, Gebofal, was it very visual overall? Did you get a lot? Was it quite visual, or was it more a sense? Or everyone experiences things differently, right? It could be auditory, it could be different sensations or what have you.
Yeah, I mean, one of a mutual friend of ours on the Discord, he is friends with a scryer who's basically like a Kelly level scryer. Like he get, like, I think partly just even open eye being able to see shit during an operation, which I am not. Maybe I just haven't done enough psychedelics, mainly because the amount of psychedelics I've done is 0. But someday that will happen, I'm sure. I just got to get to Canada.
Yeah,
but
there you go. Where
exactly.
they're legal.
Yeah, where they're legal or at least decriminalized. So
something like
yeah. So in terms of that, what will happen is I will see some stuff. I will see like a vision of, let's say, I'll use that same example with Mirzand, where I would see like a field and I would see horses on the field, and then those horses turned into tanks. This is from it's not in the Gebofal thing, but it's from that vision. I'm just recalling this one. Some visions are more memorable than others. Sorry, angels, you all are doing your best. But the horses turned into tanks, and then guiding those tanks or coming behind those tanks was the governor Mirzand. So I could see all of this, right? But sometimes what I would get is it's not like somebody's talking to you in your ear about this. Sometimes it can be like that, but not for me. It's not always like that. It's more like look at it, like the vision is showing me something, and then I get the sense of meaning, and then
Yeah.
I am putting words to that, and then occasionally the angels will correct that, or I'll get the sense that no, that's not quite right, and so I'm trying to adjust my language to get at that meaning that is sort of it's a felt sense of something. It's sort of like
Yeah. Yeah.
well, let's use the example of John Dee, right? Like
Mhm.
John Dee found himself, when it came to the Monas Hieroglyphica, he felt like he was pregnant with this idea. Well, what
Uh-huh.
does that mean? Well, it's
Mhm.
kind of like that. It's like you're feeling like this. It's something inside you. It's like I almost got it, and you get this idea that this meaning is there, and
Okay.
you can try to like analyze it or try to put words to it, and the
Mhm.
angels are like guiding you. No, not quite there. Not quite. Okay, that's it. That you just said it right, or you just now you have the sense of that right. And part of what I'm trying to do when I'm talking aloud into the voice recorder as I'm having these visions is trying to make sense of that in a way that somebody else could like read that. And
Mm.
of course in this podcast I'm like kind of going, it seems like I'm kind of going all over the place,
Uh-huh.
but it's like if you pull it in and if you have this knowledge, or if you've done the research on everything that I've mentioned and then try to synthesize it in this grand way, it's going to be easy. But if you're, let's say, like a teenager coming across this who hasn't been as well read, then you're
Mhm.
going to be like Dr. Justin Sledge was when he was trying to read Immanuel Kant, and he tells a story. It was so hilarious. He's the host of Esoterica. He says he threw the
Oh.
book across the room because he was so frustrated with that, and he didn't understand it. It's like, well, it's because you're a teenager. You need to pull in a lot of other philosophical concepps, or
Sure.
just knowledge that you just can't possibly have gotten to by that time.
Sure, 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 definitely. There's something I made a note here. While you were doing the Gebofal ritual, did you have the full furniture set up, or were you
Yeah,
okay? You had the ring on, you had your lamin, you had the
yeah,
table.
yeah. I
Okay, I'm
even have the
curious
ring and
about
lamin
that.
on. Yeah, I have the ring and lamin on now. Yeah, what
Oh, there you go. Yeah.
Leitch made a very good reminder. Without this, I shall do nothing.
Right,
Right?
which is very clearly written in
Oh,
the in the diaries.
that's right. That's right. But
Right.
yeah, so it's a little kind of, actually, maybe I'll be able to pull this off. Hang on one second. I'll just
Okay.
pull up
Yeah.
some of the weird things. I'll just pull up one of the tablets here
Okay.
to show the people the other links that I go to. So I say one of the tablets while he grabs four. So this is like the typical tablet. This happens to be the air tablet because it's sort of facing south and all that. So the way I constructed this, by the way, is because the black cross,
Mhm.
I actually made literal tablets, but then the black cross, you can see here, you can see Bitome and Nanta there at that side, and then here you can see XRP. Let me put it like this. Yeah, XRP, and then Hakoma.
Mhm.
That's part of the tablet. And while everybody gets to see my Batman jammies. But what I did is I put that black part on the side of each of these.
Okay.
So these are actually doubled up. I just said, okay, if I put all these together, I want it to appear on each of the associated sides of that. But anyway, so
Oh,
that's the tablet.
mhm.
But so this is just like, you get to see how people actually make this stuff. Kids,
Right.
it's not too hard, but you got to put some thought into it. Because if I
Right.
were to actually make the entire watchtower,
Mhm.
then, or the entire grand cross, you'd
Okay.
only have one of those things. But I had to duplicate
Right.
it in order. So each one of those tablets has it.
Right.
So then what I did is I made, like a tablet of union,
Okay. That's
kind
cool.
of a Golden Dawn style thing.
Mhm.
But this is all like back when I was making it back in 2019.
Uh-huh.
And then I've said, well, then I was thinking about, well, Stenwick talks about this name Enub, and it's like, what is this? It's the first
Mhm.
letter of each of those names. So I made one of these,
Mhm.
which has, each of the four letters of the XRP, Hakoma, Nanta, and then
Mhm.
Bitome. And then I'm like, let me make this. This is a septenary system. Let me make one more. So I have four tablets, and I'll have those two kind of uniting tablets. And I said, let me make one more. How would I make one more? I'm just going to have the letter L, which stands for the first or one. But
Mhm.
you see here, you got the black background, that bilberry juice black background. You get the white that's complementary to that, and then the two tails of the letter L
Mhm.
are green and red.
Uh-huh.
So what I
Very
would
cool.
do is I would use each of those extra tablets uh, at various points in the system. So when I did the watchtowers, I would just use those, like the air tablet, I would use just each of the elemental ones. And then when I got to the end, those last 3 days, I would use the 2 tablets of union, and then finally on that last day, I'd use the letter L. By the way, so okay, so what I would do is I would make the prayer, I would make the call, I would, everybody, everything is kind of like, everything is in its place, right? The last day, I didn't know what to do.
Okay.
Because what's on the last day? It's call 1. Well, what is the strictly speaking call 1? Not the first spoken call of the 48.
What's
strictly
it's the unrevealed hidden,
the unrevealed call?
Yeah.
And what's the it's not to be spoken. Well, what else is what's not to be spoken is also the Liber Loagaeth itself, right? Especially that leaf 1. So I got the sense, I'm like, well, first of all, not until God's time, right? Well, when is God's time? I don't know, but it's been 400 years since Dee and Kelly, right? So I'm like, let me just try this. Let me just, read this call, and because maybe it's time, its time has come, and I just sort of felt moved to do that. So I did wind up reading that off. At first, I was reading off the leaf itself, and I'm just like, I'm glad I prepared for this in advance. I'm like, this is way too much, because as decent as I am in Enochian, it's like reading a foreign language. When you're just at the pre-fluency stage, it's not going to come off as quickly.
Right.
So I'd already printed off like a
cheat sheet or something.
A cheat sheet, yeah, with English letters and all of that. So I read that one. So in the morning, I read the back of it, which was 36 minutes, and then vibrating the words, by the way. Then in the afternoon, I vibrated the front part, which has more words to it, because that doesn't have the weird final 9 rows. That was 49 minutes, and at the end, it was like, when I did the whole thing in the evening. Oh, wow. And yeah, that was a lot. But what I got was this sense of, so let me describe that vision, because this is like the culminating thing, right? This is the final
last
day,
literally, right? Yeah.
The final countdown. Yeah. So you get to that one, and what I found was, it was kind of interesting. Like the vision I had was like, I was being, and you get this like, the vision is partly, you're actually feeling this happen in your astral body. Sure. And I was told specifically, okay, you need to bilocate. You need to both be in your body, so you can sort of manage this. I mean, you're already kind of doing that when you're doing all this and you're having a vision and all that. Sure. But you need to, like, be aware of where you are physically, but also be aware of what you're doing on the astral. Or what the energetic or imaginal, whatever you want to call it. So it felt like I was like being beamed straight up, just like something straight out of Independence Day, where the light takes you up and lifts you out of your body, or a contact experience. And but it wasn't like I went straight up. And every time you've seen these movies where there's something in the sky and there are all these big clouds, it was like that. But instead of coming up into a ship, it was just like this black circle, right? So we get that same kind of
theme
yeah,
as mentioned earlier. Yeah.
Yeah, and when you go through the posts, take your time with those. But what you'll see is, like, there's this evolution. It's a slight change and a slight change and a slight change. Sure. But it was like that. And so getting to that point, I was taken up to that, and then it became like really cosmic. Okay. So like I found myself like understanding like the heart of God. So the first time it was just God literally like put his hands like this, like folded, like not quite a prayer, but like he interlaced his fingers like this, and he stuck them right through my heart center, so that it was like basically bisecting my heart. So that way it's like he was getting in and he was manipulating that. But then on the final vision, it was like at this cosmic level, and I realized the sense that I got was that, okay, God is, or the divine, or whatever you want to call it, is, yeah, he's omnipotent, and he can do anything. But it would be like, if he were to like intervene, it would be like he would lose respect for himself, right?
Okay.
Like imagine a child, right? Like you think of helicopter parents, you know, using that stereotype term, but you know, it's like, well, I can't always do this stuff for you. You need to like, I'm trying to like help you be the best person. And if I were to do this, that, and the other thing, which would be very easy for you, you would never know difficulty. And you would never feel the sense of empowerment that comes with overcoming that. So it's kind of like that. It's also just the direct limitations of God himself. You know, the sense I never got was like omnipotence per se, but it's like omnipotence in the sense of, okay, I'm omnipotent in the sense that I can create reality, but I am also real. So all of a sudden I'm bound to some extent by what reality is. So by the rules of that. So it's a whole thing, you know, that, and this is my own experience. Other people may have a significantly less suffering / Buddhist oriented experience, but the sense that I got was that was it was very comforting in that sense too, because I get that. Why would you operate contrary to your nature just because a part of you wants to do that, right? Like I don't like, you know, somebody makes me mad in traffic, I'm not going to go out and, you know, make their life a living hell, because the grander part of myself says that's a valid part that I also will not act on, right?
Sure.
So, but the other interesting thing was that, and this has happened to me before, when I was, I had finished the Aethers the first time in 2019. And I kind of, you know, still in that current, I'm very, like the groove of the current for me is like very deep at this point, because it's going to be tough when I want to explore like the PGM. I'm gesturing to all my other books here. I want to do all that. It's just like, I'm waiting for Enochian to say, okay, you're done. You've done enough.
Right.
But just to put a cap on that. So when I was working with that, one of the things I did was I made an Enochian language prayer, which was my request for additional Enochian words. And I did get some. Now I'm going to call all of those, I always call all of those Neo-Enochian, because it's not a true Enochian system from D. and Kelly. I get that. And it could be I'm completely off. Whatever, but I did get some stuff, and I got them in a similar format. I would get like a tablet, like a table of like 12 by 7 or 12 by 12 at one point. But what I got at the end of this vision on the final day 49, was, okay, now we're going to start speaking some Enochian to you. And oh, okay, you know, so I would, and mercifully it was given to me in English letters, so I would actually see the word and I would just pronounce it aloud. And it turns out that across those 3 different times that I scried that final, using the final call, which I just took to be leaf 1, that's how I did it. I did not say I'm just going to be silent. No, I vibrated that, like I said before. Then it turns out that you get to the end of all of that, then it was 49 words in all, which is what I got. So back to the septenary system. I did not plan it like that, but that's how it goes.
At the end of the day, what do you think Enochian is? Is it sort of this Western, what would you say, initiator enlightenment system, sort of like how Tibetan Buddhism has their own sort of magical system towards, it's something I think I mentioned last time, like my experience in the Aethers too, it's almost like the Bardos, like, you know, the Tibetan Book of the Dead, they talk about traveling through the Bardos, right? It's and they have their own sort of magical system and whatnot for that. Do you think this is almost like the Western equivalent to that, or how do you see, like, ultimately, in other words, I guess my question is, what is Enochian? What is the system? What do you see it after working through all, you know, different aspects of it? What do you ultimately see this as in your, you know, humble opinion?
In my humble estimation? So on one level, it's pretty simple, right? Like you're unfolding. It's the way I describe Bina is that, you know, you're a complicated person, right? But if we were to take like the consciousness level of like a rock, or you know, the sidewalk that you walk upon, or whatever the case may be, that's got like the barest of consciousness. It's kind of like, you know, when they make fun of somebody, they call them a smooth brain because they don't have any folds, you know, it's like that. So it's very smooth. Imagine that being like this big, vast thing of paper, right? You know, just going on for miles and miles in any direction. And then you get if you were to take an animal, then what would happen is you could say, well, that is like an interesting little origami like folding in that. And
Okay.
we're a much more complicated version of that. So what I say Enochian does is it unfolds you enough so that you can see the vast consciousness around you, and that you're a part of that, and that you are enfolded into that reality.
Mm-hmm.
That it's a very like cosmic level lesson, like, oh, okay, you know, all of a sudden I need to learn what Buddhism learned, which is to treat everybody the same, you know, with compassion and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of like the first part. In terms of what it does, in terms of what it is, I think what it's doing, I think it's the universe's way of trying to become more aware of itself,
Mm-hmm.
even beyond science, let's say.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Mm-hmm.
like we are trying to show you how your consciousness is completely enfolded within absolutely everything. One of the things I got at the very end was like this very like holographic sense of myself. So
Mm-hmm.
like you and I are talking right now, right? And you may be familiar with this concept of like mirror neurons. They say it's
Sure,
kind of
sure.
one of the,
Mirroring body language and
like if you like it's one of those, I'm not getting at all political when I say this, but like when Trump and Putin were together,
Mm-hmm.
one of the things that you know how Trump always did this, and he lean forward and his legs would be spread pretty wide.
Sure.
If you notice the first time that Putin and Trump were together,
Mm-hmm.
Putin was making his own body posture exactly like that.
Right.
It's this subtle signal like, hey, you
We're
and
on the
I,
same
we're
page. We're on
alike.
the same level. Yeah.
We're exactly alike. And by the way,
Sure.
I don't even care that all around the world can see that. I am making this point to all of you as well.
Sure.
But
Sure.
to Trump, I don't think he's at that level. I think he was just like, oh, this is my
Right.
friend.
It's
You
sort
know,
of like some
so,
NLP kind of stuff.
yeah, like kind of hijacking the mind like that. But at any rate, so I'm saying all of this to say that you and like there's an interesting thing that if you see, you know, I'm expressing a lot. Obviously I'm, you know, I'm handsy in the, you know, in a very, you know, consensual way right now. So so what I'm saying is like if you can almost like imagine, you can almost imagine my mind as I'm trying to express to you what is on my mind, right?
Sure.
So what'll happen is like you come to discover that there are certain times that if you interact with an individual, your mind is forever changed as a result of that.
Oh yeah,
right?
Sure.
So now take that to the nth degree, right? So all of a sudden you realize, well, you know, I've been interacting with all these other people who have had all these other interactions. So I'm being influenced by them as I'm simultaneously influencing other people. So then you realize, but all of us are also being influenced by the fact that we have rocks around us, or we have trees, or we have birds, or we have, or, you know, nowadays we have computers, you know, all of these things that are like semi, like, you know, universal. So then you can start, you know, you can bring in like Jungian collective unconscious and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
But the main takeaway is that we are part of the like this living consciousness, and that our identity is pretty much holographic with the universe
Mm-hmm.
and who we are, and vice versa. And so like there's this this idea of isomorphism in mathematics, where the smaller part suddenly is taking on a look in that fractal sense, like you were saying. It's
Mm-hmm.
looking a lot like the large, and the large is looking a lot like the small. And then when
Sure.
you realize that, it's like, geez, you know, I'm divine, and I should be, if I want to like get with the program, I
Mm-hmm.
need to try to, you know, it would be helpful if I made it easy for people who are interested to also become aware of their divinity.
Mm-hmm.
And for those who aren't interested, to just treat them nicely, you know, treat them
Sure.
well.
Sure.
And, you know, ensure that we solve some of the big problems in this world, or at least make an effort towards that. So this is, you know, I know this is sounding very psychedelic. Still, number of psychedelics is 0, but it's
A
a
lot on my
lesson that,
side. I've
yeah,
done a
not on
lot of
your side, right?
psychedelics. Yeah.
But this is like the lesson that you take away
Yeah.
from Enochian, is that you can get all that if you don't want to blow your mind out with drugs, which is
Sure.
BS, you know, because I mean some people do, I guess, but you know,
Oh yeah, it is
and
possible, but yeah.
it is possible, but but if you want to avoid all that, you
Mhm.
know, you can get into Enochian. Is it tough?
Right.
Yes, but you understand. I've been listening to some of Frater RC's podcast
Mhm.
episodes and his other appearances,
Mhm.
and he talks about how, you know, you get a much more visceral sense of the magic you're working is literally changing. You can,
Mhm.
it's as if you're interacting with the physical world. But what I would
Exactly.
say
Yeah.
is that what I would say is it's that change in consciousness. It's that developing of the mind into something into a greater awareness of itself. You're
Yeah.
waking up that part of your mind. It's sort of like, it's like you're going through a psychological puberty.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
You know,
It's very
something
similar.
that was dormant, it like suddenly comes up. Go ahead.
Yeah, yeah,
Sorry.
it's very similar in that regard to doing, like heroic doses of psychedelics. So a lot of my Enochian experiences have been very similar in some respects to doing, intense psychedelic sessions where, it's like the reality tunnel has been expanded and you come away. They say like people who do, a decent amount of mushrooms, like in one dose, they come away being 80% more open. These are like in psychological or clinical trials or whatnot.
Yeah.
It's like that. Like you walk away, with doing Enochian, it does change your sense of perception and things along those lines. But what's different about it is like you can take a lot of psychedelics and you can be in some tough places and you're not coming out of that for hours, depending on what you did. It could be LSD,
Yeah. Yeah.
mushrooms. Whereas with Enochian, you could scry the aethers, you could do this work. And if you're not ready, it's almost like you're knocked back softly and organically, and you have time to work back to it, right? Whereas in psychedelics, sometimes you're not given that. You're on for a tough ride sometimes, So
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
is a more organic, requires more effort, but it's more, you're building up to it, so to speak. Not saying you can't do both. I recommend doing both personally, but it is something that I think it long term it's working towards sustaining this consciousness, because the fact that it is holistic, the fact that you can work with it, long term. You can't necessarily do huge doses of acid or mushrooms every day, or else you blow out, as you were saying, right? Blowing out
Yeah.
of steel if you're just nonstop dosing acid, right? But it is something that you can work with long term and sustainably, I guess would be a way to say it,
Yeah.
But
Exactly.
yeah, but you have been working with all the different aspects of Enochian. Is there any other areas that you're exploring now? I'm curious about that too.
Yeah. So, I mean, one of the things I think, well, there's a couple things. I should mention this. I've put on my blog, you can find the post or search for it, list the Enochian implements. I started making the SDA. I'm like, this is just too much. That's the sort of thing where you get the graphic designer. You can find that online. We talked about that in our last episode, but
Uh-huh.
I have all of those up on my website now as an Excel file. I
Uh-huh.
chose not to lock it in case you don't like my particular approach or you think you can improve on it. That's fine.
Mhm.
But it's to make it printable. And because why not do it twice?
Mhm.
It's like that line in Contact, first rule of government spending, why build just one when you can build two for twice the price?
Right.
I'm making an Excel printable version of Liber Loagaeth.
Oh wow. Okay.
That is, yeah. So there's a couple of things that go into it. So I'm just transcribing what I'm seeing, and it's very tempting to just go say, okay, here's what condor.de has, and he's made this public. So I'm
Mhm.
just going to like copy that and just dump it into Excel. I could do that, but just having gone through it with the handwritten version, it's just like, there are errors, and I may make some more errors, but I can definitely see, at least at the end of the day, if you get like a computer program, they can highlight all the differences, and then you can look to that particular cell. Somebody can fix all this at the end of the day, ultimately.
Okay.
But what I wanted to do is go through the leaves, type them up as I see them,
Okay.
using these other things as a reference sometimes, but at the end of the day, making my decision.
Okay.
When I went through it the first time, there were some times when I sort of got like this intuition, well, let me add this letter here, because there's some times when the letters are missing. And
Okay.
just a real quick aside here, like what you see is if you go through the first 28 leaves are just like every cell is full.
Mhm.
But then what happens is you get to leaf 29 and every other letter is more or less missing. Like sometimes there's additional letters in there, but it's like, what is this? It's like the information is falling out. And this is like kind of when you get to that Zax level, it's like, oh, well, suddenly there's this information that is being lost. It's like you're below the abyss. You're not getting that fullness of it. So it's kind of like that. And then finally, the last one, they didn't even have that. You needed to make some decisions along the way because it's weird. It's a much smaller. It's like it's a 5 3x7 tables.
Okay.
That needed to be gleaned from 112, maybe 113 letters. Okay. Stephen Skinner reconstructed, and he says there's 112. So I just went with him. So the interesting thing is you do the math on that. Wait a minute. 5 times 3 is 15. 7 times 15 is 105. I got to get rid of 7 letters. So I made some decisions. I went through that whole process on my blog about why, and I try to leave like I just try to be first draft Jones, partly because I'm lazy with those things, but also because if I make an update, people can see the thought process that I'm going through and understand the reason why I needed to make decisions and why things changed. But at any rate, I've figured out a way to reduce that, which is to use the actual spelling of the letter in Enochian and then use that to reduce it. So like if I were to say the spelling of the letter C is C-E-E, well, if I wanted to reduce that, I would just put it in the letter C. So if I saw that. So that's kind of what I did. I did that same thing with Enochian. But my goal is to type all of that up and make it printable and accessible, because I really feel like there's just too many barriers to entry. And I did all of this by hand, and there's great value to that at the subtle body level, but I know not everybody's going to do that. And if they still want to work a Gebofal system, I want to make that free and accessible, and they can print it off. They still need to buy the silk. They still need to buy the binder if they're going to do it like I did, which is, make, just a scrapbook binder, because once it's bound in there, it's a book, it's like, it's a scrapbook, but it's a book. So that's what's coming up. In addition to that, I want to see, I'm going to look through the Skinner's copy of Dee's diaries. It's not complete, but I did buy the other half of that from a different author. But I'm going to try.
Is it the Klein version, or what'd you get?
I'm trying to remember the author. It's kind of like this very flat looking, just text on that, but I have it. I think it's Klein, but I could be wrong.
Okay.
It's older. But it's still it's up to that point that then Skinner went ahead and did the second half of that. Okay. But I want to see exactly the system that the angels used, because at first they're doing it like they're calling out the part of the grid that has that word in there, or that letter that goes with that part of the call. But I want to see if I can find a system to that and see, okay, is there some kind of equation that they were following? And my math stops at like statistics and calculus, and maybe somebody will find a better algorithm for that. But at the very least, I can like type out and say, okay, if we're going to use basic row column thing, somebody could type that into an AI program and have it do machine learning until it figures out, and then they can just verify it to say, okay, this call actually matches whatever the algorithm spits out.
Right, have some computer programs figure out all the little cryptic puzzles going on.
I probably won't figure it out, but maybe a computer could.
Maybe AI will.
Maybe AI will. And that's what I found too. I'll just give you a real quick story here. Like each of the each of the zodiacal kings, as they appear in the Aethers, has a certain number of Servian angels with them. That is like this huge number, like all of them over 1,000, right? Sometimes it's in like the 6,000-7,000 angel range. What I found was that the Aethers also had like some of these very large numbers. It turns out that half of those very large numbers add up to exactly a certain combination of that, but there's no way that a human could figure it out. It's part of this thing known as a subset sum problem. But I was able to use at first Excel, but then I realized a deficiency in Excel, because when I did it in the Linux version of that, LibreCalc, it took Excel like hours and hours and hours. LibreCalc, it was like 2 minutes. It found the solution. But it would find for half of those, it was able to find an exact sum, and I went through. I have that in my blog, and the post on there saying this is the aethers it's associated with, or here's the dyads it's associated with. So
Sure.
people who are like super hardcore nerdy math and also do Enochian and all this stuff,
Right.
that might be of interest.
Right, right. Well, I mean, you have a lot of interesting resources in your blog. That sounds like a really good one. And, maybe someday, you did mention, maybe someday you could put out an ebook or a physical book someday, because this is like the one area of this practice that hasn't really been published or explored much. But
yeah, I mean, I think Leitch has it. I think I'll just let him publish that thing, because like I say, I reworked, I tweaked what he had. What I did is I took a strictly, I'm going to do them in exactly reverse order, whereas he only flipped the first and last day. But that's just like, that's me, that's just my style, man, but
sure.
Other people may, yeah, I think I'll let him do that. He's just quite the resource. He's fantastic. So I recommend his books. He gets into the depth as well. Like Lon Milo Duquette's EVM, even Enochian Vision Magic, to me was a great introduction. It helps you get your lay of the land, and it has most of the same stuff that Aaron has, but Aaron has like other context, or he's done deeper dives. I mean, that's why he's written more books about it, I think. Sure. But all these authors are excellent, and so I'm not, it's just like, if you want like to be a completionist, I would recommend Aaron. But if you really just want to figure out what's going on, I would say, Lon Milo Duquette. But if you want other perspectives on certain stuff, I would say Scott Stenwick. If you just want to focus on this part first, and then this part, and then this part, he's pretty good about that. But yeah, there are a lot. I think this is like the time when like stuff is coming together. I was only able to like pull together a lot of this stuff because I had so many different references, and I was able to like quickly go through my Kindle and just find it, and it wasn't, I could do some thinking, and if I was curious about something, it's not like, well, I had to do this deep slog through the source materials. Instead, all these people have worked so hard to pull it together and make it accessible.
Right, so. Definitely. I think it's good to have some of the original, get the diaries, get what is it, Peterson's 5 Books of Mystery, get as much as you can of the original stuff, but then also, like you said, there's people like Leitch and these other people who have done deep dives into this. I think it's good to get a variety of perspectives and sort of, make your own interpretation, I guess you would say.
Yeah, it's digestible. They made it digestible, because otherwise you throw the book across the room. What is it? You don't start with the diaries. Just don't do that.
Right. Pretty tough read, but yeah. I've never really read. A lot of people recommend Jeffrey James. It's an older one, right? Jeffrey James, Enochian Vocation of Dr. John D. And also Elizabethan Magic, I think, is another one that's pretty highly recommended. Have you read those two or no?
Nah.
They're like older. They're published probably, I don't know, quite a long time ago. But
yeah, and I'm not knocking it. I just haven't. Haven't gone there. It's like I can only buy so many books at a time.
Right. Exactly. That's true. Anyways, I think we covered a lot of ground here. Any other things you want to mention, or things to plug and projects?
No, I mean, I'm like I say, just keep an eye out for that Gebofal thing. That Liber Loagaeth thing. I've written up. I'm on leaf 7, which is pretty good progress, considering that these are the harder leaves to do, or maybe I don't know. I won't get into the details on that. It's time consuming, yeah. But yeah. I hope to have that out by the end of the year. So keep an eye out for that. And just Enochian.today. Don't start on the last post. If you're new to Enochian, start on the first post, where I have a bunch of prayers actually, which may be helpful to you. Okay. But other than that, I'm just trying to hum along, make this more accessible, for people who are interested. If you're not interested, well, you've made it to the end of a very long podcast for something you're not interested in.
Yeah, for some reason, I think people who tune into this are going to be the hardcore, the hardcore people. It's kind of interesting with Enochian. You have like people who study it, but then never do it. And then people who read everything and then they just do one part of it. But you're the sort of special case where you really explored like the part, like the rare of the rare practice, I guess you would call it almost.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, I'm following in Leitch's footsteps because he's helped other people through the process. So I think he's like I say, he's the man.
Right. Yeah,
So,
definitely. All right, cool. Well, until next time, and thanks for coming on.
yep. Thanks, brother.
Hold on